For us, the recruitment is not only about filling positions quickly or make it a transactional recruitment. It is about actually building and safeguarding our strong culture. That's why at the heart of everything, so our first principle is the values-based recruitment. So then, of course, we take a look at the technology, we take a look at the skills, but in the beginning as a principle, and it is always our forever part, is the values and the values-based recruitment.
Hi, I'm Johnny Campbell, CEO and co-founder of Social Talent, and welcome to the Hiring Excellence podcast. I'm delighted this week to be joined by somebody who I've known for actually many years, who's always challenged me and we've great conversations. I'm always interested in what this organization is doing. And it's quite unique actually in terms of its culture, and we'll hopefully dig into some of that later on. But today I'd like to welcome Tugba Åkesson from IKEA. I probably butchered your surname, by the way, Tuba, so you can give out to me for that in just a second. But Tuba is the VP of Global and Global Head of Talent Acquisition for IKEA, or actually technically Ingka Group, but she can explain that for you. And as I'm sure most of you know, IKEA, and you've used IKEA, maybe half the furniture in your house is IKEA. Actually, I'm looking at a desk right in front of me that I built last night. That was IKEA, with an IKEA chair and different stands. I think it is one of those companies that has had enormous impact on the world, has a fantastic story, and for whom culture is so important. And we're going to dig into that today. But first of all, Tuba, you're very welcome to the podcast. Perhaps you could introduce yourself to our audience and maybe tell us a little bit about your career and how you found yourself at IKEA/Ingka Group.
Great. Thank you, Johnny. And I'm glad that hopefully you will enjoy your furniture, first of all. I'm sure you do. But thank you for inviting me to your podcast. I'm a big fan of your episodes and also LinkedIn posts. They're truly inspiring. Short about me and the organization. I think you give a very good a short explanation, but I am heading up talent acquisition for Ingka Group at IKEA. So it is the largest IKEA franchisee. We have 3 divided areas at Ingka. One is the Ingka centers, such as meeting places. We have the IKEA retail, where we're bringing the IKEA brand to 31 countries. And Ingka investments, where we have purposeful investment for a long-term growth. We operate in 574, I remember it well, IKEA retail locations across 31 markets, and hire more than 51,000 internal and external talents every year. So it's a fast-paced retail organization, recruiting for a wide range of roles, predominantly high-volume store talent to service office positions, also e-commerce for our range, and digital experts in our digital hubs, which not everyone know about that because we are predominantly in the retail, but we have a lot of digital experts in our organizations as well for our digital hubs. And that also makes our talent acquisition department both highly complex but extremely exciting.
Tuba, I haven't planned this, but if you don't mind, could you share as the short summary of the roots of IKEA? Maybe Ingvar, when it was founded, why it was founded, what the original idea behind IKEA was, because I think it's really important, because we'll tie it back perhaps to some of the questions around culture and values later, but not a lot of people might be familiar with the origin story of the organization. So if you wouldn't mind maybe sharing with us a short version that you're comfortable with.
Yes, absolutely. So maybe then I would like to start with a Småland story to answer your question, and you be in the region with us, Johnny. Småland means small lands in Swedish, and that's where it all began. It's a rural region in southern Sweden where our founder, Ingvar Kamprad, grew up. Life in Småland was hard back then, and people relied on each other to survive. And this has created a culture of resilience and collaboration and resourcefulness. And what we know from also Ingvar's story, since he was a young kid, he's been very visionary and entrepreneurial, and in a very young ages. So he started to sell different products. He is a great communicator as well as negotiator, and then has been a very popular in his village and started to develop different type of business, which the entrepreneurial culture comes from. So we have it's a great picture. We have we have a picture of one of our the first store. It's a very small wooden house in Småland where Ingvar started to build furniture and many other stuff. And then and when you see that picture, and when you come by work every day and you see what we call a blue box, our retail store, it's amazing. And you can see it now all around the world.
It's probably difficult for listeners in 2025 to understand what it was like in, I think, 1940s when Ingvar started the business. When my understanding of the story, and I've read the book that you kind of gave me one of my first visits to Sweden to your team, that the furniture industry, particularly in Europe, was very closed. There was a small number of firms who controlled furniture, kind of design and supply. And furniture was very expensive. Good furniture was very expensive. And from his humble roots, as you say, in Småland, Ingvar had a vision of furniture for all. Why couldn't everybody have stylish furniture? And this was resisted, I believe, massively when he first came up with this concept and went to trade shows. And the existing incumbent manufacturers and distributors tried to push him out and ban him from trade shows and not have him stock in their stores. And, Ingvar had kind of figured out how to deliver lower cost, which is the famous flat pack, I guess, became the way to get the logistics of it, but to bring high quality, fashionable design furniture to everybody. And I think, the average person who might walk into an IKEA blue box store, as you say, today might be unfamiliar with those roots in terms of how rebellious, I guess, he was. And I guess how forthright he was with his values and ideas. And that underpinning, more than 50 years later, is probably the subject of our conversation today, because Tuba, on this show, we've had many, many guests recently, particularly who have large retail presences, talk about how they're rolling out this type of AI and that type of AI to take over hiring and the results of it. That's not quite the way IKEA is approaching this, Tuba. I'd love to hear, your views on the role of something like AI in hiring, particularly, let's say, on the retail side, where we've documented lots of retail organizations, whether it's 7-Eleven, UPS, FedEx, or Sephora or H&M, are talking about how they're doing scaled AI hiring. That's not quite the way that IKEA is looking at it right now. And I'd love you to talk about how you think as an organization about AI in the hiring process today, and perhaps what the reasoning behind some of that is.
For us, the recruitment is not only about filling positions quickly or make it a transactional recruitment. It is about actually building and safeguarding our strong culture. That's why at the heart of everything. So our first principle is the values-based recruitment. So then, of course, we take a look at the technology, we take a look at the skills, but in the beginning, as a principle, and it is always our forever part, is the values and the values-based recruitment. So that needs to be in place before we started to integrate all the other things. And our talent acquisitions teams, together with our hiring managers, play a very crucial role for this, because it's not enough our recruiters have it. We need to make sure our hiring managers also have values-based interviews, right? And by focusing on values rather than purely on availability, and hiring through our values, we create, and we see it every year, and you can feel it in the IKEA culture. We create teams that are more engaged, more committed, better aligned with our vision and culture. And this leads to a stronger performance and higher retention, and ultimately happier, what we say, coworkers to happier customers. It's really important. It's that simple. If you're happy in a place, you will perform better, you will understand better, and you will contribute better. So that's how I see that. Of course, not ignore at all the AI, but for us, AI is an enabler and our compass. though, remains with our values. Yeah, I would say that. And then I actually would like to give. You were mentioning that, Johnny, for our booklets that Ingvar has written a couple of years ago. I would like to give an example for this, as one of our guiding principles comes from that. And the document you were talking about, called The Testament of a Furniture Dealer. And it's written by Ingvar Kamprad. And it's like a compass for us at IKEA. Such an amazing and ageless document. You really see where we talk about the visionary picture, because if I'm in a dilemma, for instance, in my daily work, so I can always go back to that testament and take a look at, this is how we solve things, this is how we think. And of course, it needs to fit with you as well, who you are as a person. And there is a good example in that testament. There's one place that said that our product range being our identity, and about designing for a long-term enjoyment in people's homes. So long-term enjoyment in people's homes where you feel best. And for us, business and people agenda is the same. It's not different. They are very interconnected. And this, we believe, applies for our coworkers as well. We don't want to have someone to join us for a short show up. We want them to feel at home with us and to enjoy a long-term personal and hopefully professional enjoyment with us. So it's the same concept that it is highly important for us.
So Tuba, the importance of values I get for IKEA, and the benefits of it, as you mentioned, are phenomenal. Reduced attrition, more mobility, higher innovation, higher satisfaction. But is that not possible with AI-driven hiring? Are they in conflict, or do you see them as perhaps living side by side? And do you use any of that kind of AI technologies today, or what would your plans be for the future?
When you're a very strongly values-driven company, and at the same time, talent acquisition is very close to technology, right? Very close to business, very close to technology, and it constantly happens with skills, and it's very dynamic environment. But if you go back to the principle before you start skills, AI, the technology, the inclusivity, all this. If you go back to the principle, so we blend technology with the human touch. It is important for us. It's always like I mentioned before, both and. Speed should never come at the expense of the quality. And with technology, we've just finalized, to make it more concrete, our values-based pre-screening pilot, for instance. And so the people use the technology in here, that our recruiters actually quickly, who has a higher values fit, quickly go through the process while still experiencing our culture through personal values-based interviews. So this matters even more as a new generation, how I see, where people are looking for more meaningful relationships with their employer. And this is a great way. Interviews is a great way to get a sneak peek of it and really experience of it. So it's still our recruiters are the decision makers here. Interviews, in that sense, is a very powerful way we see to showcase our culture, and also let candidates, like I mentioned, truly experience this. And the way they are treated and the questions they are asked say, in my opinion, a great deal of the company who you are entering into, or a lot about the organization. And this is a fair chance, I think, every time you enter in for candidates, both for recruiters, how get to know the candidate, but it also gives a very fair chance to the candidate to really observe the organization culture, the way how we ask questions, what kind of questions are we interested to get to know you, or we're more interested to your CV. And these kind of things makes a big difference for you to be able to make this judgment that, is this the place that I can be myself, I can be at home or not?
The way you're describing it has given me an image in my head, which is that a lot of volume retail hiring is equivalent to finding a hotel room. You're looking for just, a bed for the night, somewhere to stay, whatever works. If it's close, if it's good value, you'll take it. And an AI process to find a hotel room makes sense. But to find a home, somewhere where
Mm.
you plan to stay for many years, where you're going to make deep connections, maybe just it's not as appropriate to use a completely automated process for that. I think that's what I'm hearing from you, that, some retail hiring is just the equivalent to finding a hotel room. I need shifts, I need an income, I need decent work. But I'm not massively fussy, and I might not stay there terribly long. And so it is more transactional. And to your point, IKEA has always been about, you know, a home where this person makes it a home, has a career there, spends time there, could have many different roles across the organization. So the assessment is just different. The relationship, the experience has to be different, because you're not trying to just get people to do work on Monday morning. You're trying to get people to come and join the business, hopefully for the rest of their career. Um, would that be fair? That analogy work for you as well?
Absolutely. It's a very well summarized, John. It's exactly that's why we want to avoid from this transactional retail environment with us, because most of our people has been working in different positions at IKEA, and then this is you have a chance as well. They have started in a store. For us, it's an extremely important place to start your career or go back to, where you can really be in the service office. And then a lot of people miss to be the store environment. They go back and then they come back to another role. And it's very, very common when you meet people across IKEA, not only for Ingka. They've been working many, many years in the company, but at the same time, we have, of course, the new people that is joining. They love the brand. Uh, but there's a reason for it, and the more every year you spend in the company, then you appreciate and you understand that in deep levels. Because when you
Mm,
talk about values, it is about being and doing things. So if it needs to fit who you are. If it doesn't, how you do things will be in a conflict, and you will not be in a good place. And I would like to give a little bit of, maybe take a step back for a macro perspective as well. I think we're also living in a quite tough world right now, with polarization, geopolitical conflicts, to climate change, economic pressures that we talk a lot about also in IKEA, with people with thin wallets, because we are here to help for the many. Pandemics, these are quite big things in short times happening to us to be able to handle. And of course, these will have an individual impact with us. When uncertainty happens, and it usually goes, how I see and how we see it in our discussions, as a fear, right? It's which breeds fear usually when people are not sure, and everything is unsure with everything that I mentioned. Fear behaviors, which breeds bureaucracy. And when bureaucracy comes into the place, you take decisions slowly, and you got stuck on, or you get more protective maybe where you are, instead of um, sharing things, and you are less together. And togetherness, you were into, you ask a question what values you have, and togetherness is one of our values, one of our most beloved values, that also I see is a quite strong power for us. And that's why I always go back to, it's extremely important to living our values every day to make us stay connected, how we work together, and also never ever forget to being ourselves.
So, to the audience listening, I suspect some of them are going to be cynical. And when they hear about values-based recruiting, they're going, oh, values. Those things that are written on the wall or that are in the pamphlet you get on day one, that everyone claims they have, but very few people live by. And I want to try and express to our audience here today just how different it really is in IKEA. And to me, again, when I first came across you and the team, gosh, it was more than 5 years ago. And the idea of values-based recruiting is, oh, great, values, people have values, loads of companies have values. Oh, I get it, that's no problem. We all assess for values. And it took me, you mentioned time, it took me time to really understand this about IKEA, that this is serious. This is not just a surface level thing, it's deep. And it really hit home in my first visit to Almholt, and then my more recent visit to Almholt, through this unique cultural experience that the team has created. I don't want to spoil it for our audience, but would you mind maybe describing it or giving our audience some context as to this unique cultural immersion in Almholt? First of all, why Almholt? Almholt, who gets invited, and maybe a sneak peek as to what happens to that culture in that cultural experience.
Hmm, absolutely. And this is to your point, Johnny, that when you need to so the values cannot stay abstract, right? You need to make sure what you say is also happening in your everyday life. Otherwise, yes, all the companies has a culture, but the difference makes it, what makes us unique is that you need to really use it and embraced by the people, and they need to be relevant, who you are, the current environment, and how you do things. But if I ask you, if I turn back and ask you the question, because if I remember you being with us 2 times in this event, what was your experience when you spent 3 days with us?
Well, put me on the spot now. Interview me, Tuba. So the first time I was invited out, I was stunned. I was, oh, there's an IKEA hotel. This is wonderful. I didn't know there was IKEA hotels, and I was like, no, this is the only IKEA hotel. Okay, and I flew into Copenhagen, went across the water into Sweden, up from Malmo into Almholt, and I'm going through the countryside, going, where am I, and why am I here? And they started to go, oh, we're in small land. I recognized the SMALAND from my IKEA store, going, I know this name. I never knew it was a place. I never connected this. And then I learned when I arrived at the hotel and saw there was a museum nearby, and the museum turns out was the first IKEA store. And I realized this is where Ingvar, the founder, grew up. I was, okay, that's interesting. So we're going to a hotel where the founder grew up. And that time I had to leave very early. So I went. I thought that was really interesting. And that's all I thought of. But then last time when I came back, I had a bit more time, and you had primed me and said, give yourself the time, Johnny, spend the time with us. And I basically went out on an excursion with a group, and the group was made up of course, some of the folks from the HR recruiting team. We were having an offsite meeting, but there were other folks from who had joined the business or had had the privilege of being invited to this experience. And we went out in a bus further into the countryside and arrived at a property, a home, which I found out then was the Ingvar's family home, actually where he spent his final years as well. And we got to tour around the home, which is a really special thing to do because tourists can't pay to do that. You need to be invited as an employee to be able to do that. And we were told some stories from the cultural team about the family. We got to see the family lineage, and I can tell you another interesting story another day about what I was told there, which blew me away. And then we were sent out to do some work, and you mentioned obviously small land is a part of the country in Sweden where the land is not so good, and I learned through that experience there had been a massive famine there, I think in the 1800s, and millions of Swedes emigrated to the US, which rings true as an Irish person. We had our famine in the 1800s. We saw millions of people die and exit Ireland in a very similar way. And, we were living in the countryside, parts of Ireland called Connemara, which looks very similar, which is rocks everywhere. And it's very, very difficult land to farm. And this was the environment that Ingvar grew up with, as I was told. And so we were brought out and we were broken into groups. And we had to put on gloves and boots. And we had to basically use old fashioned machinery to try and, we first of all, given shovels, we just dig rocks out of the ground. You see a rock and it sticks out of the ground and it looks like it's 2 foot wide. Turns out underneath the ground, that is 12 foot wide and very deep. And there's a lot of digging. And so we had to dig and try and get rocks out of the ground. Then we had to break rocks. So we to move rocks because these big boulders are so big. We were shown how we had to move them with old machinery before tractors and all these things, how long it took. We had to then break and smash the rocks. And finally, we used the rocks to build walls. And these are stone walls where you carefully put together the stones. And we worked in all of this as a team. You had to work together. You had to work alongside your colleagues, this togetherness, as you mentioned. It was hard work. It was slow. So you had to be very patient and very much about community the patience, the value of this work, the fact that it was hard work and you had to put it in. And I came away from this with such an experience that you could never read. A book would never fully convey this to you. It was lived. And I asked somebody else on the experience, how often people get to come here. And they said, well, not everybody gets to come here. It's special. But the person who comes goes back and they tell everybody. And they retell the story like I've retold the story now. And, this is even graduates are selected, I'm told, from certain universities, individuals who we know will go back and probably tell the experience. And there's data behind this working in terms of when a graduate or potential graduates invited from a certain college or university and then they're sent back, the rate of acceptances goes up amongst that cohort, etc. So there's not just it's not just a fun thing to do. There's a real logic in terms of recruiting strategy around this. And I have never seen anything like it in all the companies I've ever worked with or all the visits I've ever gone on. That cultural experience is at the top of any of those. So yeah, that was my experience. And I just thought it was phenomenal and such a way to continue to spread that culture and make sure everyone understood it. I thought was phenomenal.
Mm. And there you go. I mean, it made me warm in my heart, right? You really explaining beautifully, and this is exactly what we want. We want to. It's an individual experience, but it is also this is the experience we want to have. So it's not something about abstract that you mentioned, not in the on paper, but it is actually something that you can feel, you can experience, you can live, you can touch. And you were onto that as well. You were actually also using, you mentioned about togetherness, we were a team, how we approach with each other. There you go. You're using our values while you're doing that job. It's because it's tough. The stones are quite heavy. And you really are dependent on each other to be able to make the job done. And now we are in the modern times, and we have been still, I think, kind to all of you. But if you go back Ingvar's times and even before Swedish winter, and people have not a lot of resources, but they need to survive and get things done. It's a different environment to do this because it's the same job that you were doing that people were doing many years back. But I'm really happy to see that because this is something what you brought with you, and this is something also many of the participants that tell me after that is something shifted, something happened. I was always a big believer because we recruit through values, right? But they always say I'm always a big believer of our values, and I really feel that's what I'm in this company. But something when you are also in the place, that something shifts with people. And this is exactly we wanted as well, with their own experience, that it is real. It is not something they can read and hear from far away from Sweden. And that they actually bring. And one of the things that we always say, and the most important participant in this is our recruiters and our hiring teams. We make sure this is, you mentioned this event is not for everyone, but definitely with the people who are really gatekeeping and safeguarding our culture and values through meeting candidates. They play an extremely key role, and it is really for them to understand our culture, feel it, and then also go back, talk with their friends and family, but also give this feeling to the candidates as well as using this on their daily values-based interviews. So it's what we aim to.
But I love what you've said there, right? You have positioned the recruiters as the people who who are the gatekeepers and the safeguarders of the culture. Most recruiters don't see themselves as that. But to be able to turn up every day in IKEA and say, I'm here as the gatekeeper and safeguarder of our culture, and to see how important the culture it is, that elevates the role of the recruiter massively. Your job isn't to fill 20 recs or to hire 10 store assistants next week. You're the gatekeeper, you're the safeguarder of that culture. And it's a culture that's means so much to everyone in there. I think that's also magic in terms of positioning it for the recruiters. But I ask you, how does that scale? So scaling that across hundreds of stores, you said 31 different countries worldwide. that's got to be daunting, because I get how you can bring people to Sweden and make sure it works there. But how do I make sure that some store in a country that's never had an IKEA before, that the recruiter recruiting for that store and the hiring managers out there also safeguard that culture and act as
Mm.
gatekeepers? How are you thinking about scaling that, or how do you scale it?
Mm. Yeah, very, very good question. And it's not easy, right? When I mentioned in the introduction in the beginning, scaling a values first approach across hundreds of stores and more than 31 markets, it's no small challenge. And I can, and then if you think about high volume retail recruitments, I'm sure my peers would agree on that as well. It's a fast paced environment. So I won't deny the challenge in that. But I do want to, that's why I'm always giving a big heads up in also to here as well to our TA teams, both in the countries and the group functions. They are doing a fantastic job of holding onto our values, even when the talent is scarce. We talk a lot about that, and they have a big responsibility, both that and bring the talent that would be a good fit for the IKEA. So for us, technology is an enabler. It's not for us. It's not a replacement. As I mentioned earlier, we start the process with our values-based assessment, which uses automation to screen candidates in the very beginning of our recruitment process for alignment with our values. And this gives our recruiters, first of all, a great amount of time that really spend this quality time with the candidates who already scored with the high values, but also giving a consistent data-driven view for all markets, where they can actually do more richer or meaningful conversations with the candidates. And in that sense, how I see it, this is a good example where we see technology as a complement and really helping our values first approach. So more consistent and more human approach, but not less.
Have you come across any stories or examples where that combination of technology and human has led to a better outcome in terms of hiring?
Yes, but we have a couple of stories on that. The pilot has resulted in amazing. It taught us a lot of things. This pilot we did both in Inter IKEA and Ingka, a couple of Ingka markets. First of all, the data you're getting when you're on values-based recruitment of this is amazing how you actually structure your interviews even sharper based on the strengths of the values of people would like to work with us. There are a couple of interesting stories, but one of them in a quite early stages in the pilot, in one of the markets, there was a candidate who really wanted to work with us, applied multiple times during the years. But this candidate had a very little retail experience, but so probably the CV got away during the recruitment process. Finally, when we started, it was a pilot country and we did the values assessment. The candidates scored high on our values. Normally, their CV have been screened down, but in that case, the recruiter impressed, called for an interview. That was a great interview. It was a perfect match. Hiring manager met the candidates. It was exactly the same, and we have offered the candidate a role. So, and it will be very exciting also to follow this candidate's journey as well. So, and then this is what I think exactly where technology really helps. And then we have also fortunate to meet additional great people out there, maybe in our high volume environments that we miss. We will get a chance to meet them as well.
I love this. We only talked about it this week. Another webinar that we ran where we talked about how, whilst there are downsides to these technologies, some of the upsides can be that everybody can get an interview. We can't probably do a values assessment for everybody. If you have very large volumes of applications, you have to have some level of cut. And the one that we've used for decades is the CV. And we will look at someone's experience and say no, and then whittle it down to a group who would typically have done an evaluation. But with the right amount of process and technology, You could potentially give everybody the opportunity for an interview, for an assessment, because you don't have to scale it with humans. Which means, to your point, you can uncover talent that you would have missed before. And yes, I'd love to hear how this talent progresses in the organization, to see the one that would have got away that you now have in the business, how they get on. Tuba, it's been fascinating to go back and remember the experience in Almhut. And I thank you not just for being here today, but for your friendship over the years and the time I've had to spend with your team and the visits out to Almhut and to head office in Malmo as well. It's wonderful to kind of see it up close and really experience it viscerally. I think it's testament to a different way of recruiting that maybe not everyone out there is talking about or thinking about, but it's proven to be very successful for IKEA. And long may that culture continue. And we hope to hear from you again as your pilot continues and you begin to learn more and adopt more technologies. We'd love to have you back on the show to share how that's going, Tuba.
I would love that. Thank you for hosting, Johnny. It was lovely to see you again.
A pleasure. And thank you for listening and joining us this week to hear about how IKEA is more values first in their approach to hiring versus skills first, as you hear everywhere else, and why that matters so much to the organization and how they've made culture really something visceral and real, and their recruiters, not just the gatekeepers, but the guardians of that culture. We'll be back again next week with another great episode. Until then, take care and thanks for listening.